Hello world, it's Wednesday, August 19th, 2026, and here's what happened this week in PHP internals. 12 stories this week, so let's get into it. But first, is AI actually working for your team? Ballast answers that for free. It reads your Git history and never your code, and it gives you two numbers every month. Stable velocity tells you how much of what you ship survives, and a durability score between 300 and 850 tells you whether it holds up. Try it at ballast.now. This week's top story is a 5-argument function proposal that turned into 25 messages across 3 threads and became this week's central design argument. Saper Mahmoudi, who introduced himself to the list 8 days ago, proposed array search range, an array search function that takes an offset and a length so you can search any part of an array without building an intermediate copy with array slice. Wayland replied the same evening to say the soft feature freeze had already closed for 8.6. Then Rowan Tommins raised the objection that shaped everything after it, suggesting, I think it would be better to design something more composable. That is, a way to create a lazy array slice and then accept that in functions which can use it safely. He pointed at Swift, which has types that let you refer to part of an array without copying any of it. Rowan put his objection plainly, saying, if we add an array slice type, then array search range would immediately become redundant. Saper's answer is that the general thing doesn't exist and that building it would mean a new type in the engine and updates to potentially hundreds of array functions. Larry Garfield sided with Rowan and suggested shelving it. Micmac USA said he'd never had a professional project that required the function and put a design question back, saying, if a PHP array needed a pagination-style search function, should perhaps the data structure be reconsidered? Rowan then broke his own idea into 3 shippable steps. An optimized array slice iterator comes first, then iter search and iter any functions that would work with any iterator, and possibly syntax after that. He wrote the first 2 in under 20 lines each, and a polyfill for Saper's function on top. Saper added a polyfill section to the RFC, and Rowan pointed out that the version now on the wiki calls array slice, which copies the array. That's the cost the proposal exists to avoid. As of this recording, the RFC is still a draft, still targeting 8.6, and Rowan's GitHub review found the implementation still walking the entire array. Something small and irritating went to the list on Saturday. 4 functions take an extension name, and any-get-all is the only one of them that's case-sensitive. Wayland opened a pull request to bring it into line with extension loaded, PHP version, and get extension funcs. Shord Langkamper agreed it should be consistent, then asked a question that turned the thread around. Another option to make them consistent would be to have them all case-sensitive. Have you considered that? He also spotted that the manual's lowercase only note for get extension funcs isn't true. Alan JB traced it to a change back in PHP 5.0.4, and there's a docs issue open now. Daniel Scherzer objected, arguing PHP should make all 4 case-sensitive instead, since BC breaks have an established path through deprecation and removal in the next major version. Wayland agreed and withdrew his own proposal, saying he'd add extension name case sensitivity to the 8.7 deprecations RFC instead. And then 3 people showed up to argue for the thing he'd just withdrawn. Alexander Machniak listed PDO, Simple XML, Xdebug, and Swool, and asked why a developer should have to know the exact casing of each one. Matteo Bicatti called the alternative one of those useless BC breaks that makes the user experience worse instead of improving it. He also noted that composer.json generally writes its extension requirements in lowercase. Juliette Reinders-Vollmer had the last word with a practical cost. Build a version list with get-loaded extension, and you'd have to lowercase every name before PHP version would take it. Nobody has replied to her yet. Henrik Sko posted an idea on Tuesday morning. He wants a params keyword that lets you name a block of arguments once and spread it into a call, so a 6-argument cookie call collapses to 1 line. One of the 6 arguments in his own example is labeled "can't remember what this is." Alan JB replied 22 minutes later that PHP already does this with named arguments and array unpacking. Henrik came back with the actual requirement. He wants the expressions evaluated when the call happens, not when the compiler first sees them. So a time in there stays fresh. Camilla Tekiela suggested making it a type. Henrik said it wasn't worthy of a full class. Larry Garfield answered, I really don't understand why people keep saying this. What makes something unworthy of being a class? A data construct doesn't need to be as righteous as Thor to be worthy of a class. Then he named the thing Henrik was reaching for, a lazy value, evaluated only when it's read. Henrik agreed that that's what he's been after all along. And so 2 unrelated threads this week, and both of them landed on the word lazy, though nobody involved in the discussion was. Jens has been writing PHP since around the time version 2 was in use, and on Tuesday he posted about something beyond a documentation fix for the first time. Why does Var Export still print the long array syntax when that output gets pasted around by PHP Storm and Xdebug all day? There's an RFC for changing it that has been sitting there for 6 years, and Larry Garfield linked the 3 previous rounds of the same conversation without taking a side. Camila Tekiela offered the explanation. In my humble opinion, the 2 main reasons for the lack of change are apathy and lack of agreement as to what exactly the better syntax is. The constraint he describes is that Var Export is meant to be PHP executable first and human readable second. So as long as the output runs, the function is doing its job. He also named the trap. Change one thing about the output and everyone arrives with everything else they'd like fixed, which is a fair summary of the last 6 years. Otar Chekarishvili posted a pre-RFC on Monday for 2 opt-in flags on the JSON extension targeting 8.7. One is JSON allow comments, and the other is JSON allow trailing commas, and both would be accepted by JSON decode and JSON validate. Strict JSON stays the default. Trailing commas allow exactly 1 after the last element. That's 1 more than JSON allows today, and exactly as many of most of us have typed by accident. He's proposing 2 separate primary votes, so either flag can pass on its own, and says the implementation reuses the existing scanner and grammar rather than pre-processing the input, so error positions survive intact. Larry Garfield asked, does this essentially mean JSON 5 support? If so, just call it that. Anton Smirnov corrected the name. What's proposed is Microsoft's JSON C or Nigel Tao's JWCC. Real JSON 5 would also need single quotes, unquoted keys, infinities, and multi-line strings, among other things. No reply from Otar yet. Alexander Lysachenko wants to fix something about PHP's FFI. Every C value it hands back comes back as the same final class, FFI/CData. A string pointer, a zval pointer, and a raw char pointer are all the same type to PHP, which makes FFI strongly typed in the sense that there is one type. He described the consequence bluntly, saying, no C struct a binding works with can ever be described to static analysis or an IDE, and CData being final closes off every userland workaround. To get any static typing in his own library, he ships 4 separate workarounds, and instance of still doesn't work. His proposal is an opt-in class map passed as an options array in the same shape as SOAP client, so a registered C type comes back as your class instead of bare C data. He says it stays inside the FFI extension and costs nothing when unused. Bob Vinand is the only reply so far, asking for patience, saying, don't rush this, write an RFC and check what actually feels good to use and read. The 8.6 deprecation vote closed 9 days ago, and one of the items that passed deprecates SPL file objects' CSV methods. In the last days of voting, Takuya Aramaki pointed out that the read CSV flag was left out and that set CSV control is the only thing that can configure it. so removing the method leaves the flag stuck on its defaults. Nobody answered him. On Saturday, Robert Humphreys picked it back up. His reading is that leaving read CSV in place does resolve the original issue, but doesn't achieve the goal of getting CSV handling out of SPL. By his reading of the code, there's a second problem, where when the default escape character for fgetCSV changes, code using read CSV will behave differently across PHP versions with no way to pin it. His conclusion is that read CSV needs deprecating too, and that a migration path should have been part of the proposal. Still no reply. Eloy Montañez asked the list Saturday whether abstract class constants are worth an RFC. The idea is to let an abstract class or trait declare a constant with the abstract keyword and require implementers to define one. His examples are a base class that require a table name and a trait that requires a log tag, things you want fixed at author time rather than changeable at runtime. He points back to a 2017 thread on the same idea from before typed constants landed. John Bafford suggested interfaces should get the same treatment since an interface can already require a property but has no way to require a constant or a static one. Eloy was persuaded, and this morning asked why interfaces have never supported static properties. Larry Garfield answered from experience. He says they considered it while building interface property support for property hooks and passed for two reasons. Object properties cover almost every case, and attributes cover the rest. And static properties are way harder to deal with in the engine because reasons. He also left a parser problem on the table. Interfaces already support ordinary constants, so an abstract keyword may be necessary there regardless. Quick hits. Sjoerd Langkamper gave his own page to a proposal that missed the 8.6 window. Bindes, octdes, hexdes, and base convert would throw a value error when you hand them characters that aren't valid for the base, instead of the deprecation notice they've omitted since 7.4. Today, hexdes z returns 0. It targets 8.7 and has no replies yet. Whale and Do also asked for feedback on tightening two ini settings. Right now, upload max file size equals 1 GB can be read as 1 byte by the request parser, while ini get still reports the string that you wrote, which is a spectacular way to lose an entire afternoon. His change warns and falls back to the default instead. Jakub Zelenka reads that as incomplete wording in the BC policy rather than a real break. Osama Aldamiri is parking his preg throw on error RFC until early September, writing, "This has gone quiet, which I'm taking as the freeze crunch and people being busy, not as everyone being fine with it as is." And 3 releases went out on Thursday. Joe Ferguson shipped PHP 8.6.0 Beta 1, with Beta 2 due on August 27th, and Calvin Buckley and Daniel Scherzer followed with 8.4.25 and 8.5.10 RC1. Matteo Beccati mentioned in passing that the 8.6 branch should be cut on September 22nd. So there's the week. No RFC went to a vote, and nothing is in the voting phase at all. A new contributor's array search range ran into a counter-proposal for a general lazy array slice and is still in draft. A one-line inconsistency in ini get all turned into a question about case insensitivity that ended up with the author withdrawing a proposal that 3 other people then defended. A params keyword got talked into being a lazy value. Abstract class constants may pick up interfaces, and PHP 8.6 Beta 1 is out with Beta 2 due next week. Links to every thread are below. If you found this interesting, a like or a comment helps more people find it, and share it with whoever on your team has strong opinions about how Var Export should behave. Subscribe with the bell if you want these the moment they're posted each week, and if you missed last week's episode, that's a good one to watch next. Thanks again to Ballast.now for supporting this week's episode. We're Artisan Build. See you next week.